Hey, I'm Steph. I'm a motivator, creator, small business owner, and educator. I am a lover of all things health, spirituality, inspiration, and business. These are just a few words to describe me, along with passion, grit, and resiliency. Regardless of what I'm up to, I am soul-driven to create a purpose-filled life and find the advantages in adversity, all while keeping a smile on my face.
Soul Driven with Steph is a podcast that will fill up your cup and leave you feeling empowered, inspired, and on fire as you listen to interviews and stories of other soul-driven and strong women that have overcome against all odds. This podcast was a calling on Steph's soul to serve, connect, and share stories of struggles and successes, all to create a community so that you know you're never alone. Grab a cup of coffee, get ready to learn, laugh, and leave with wisdom and strategies to connect to your soul and get back in the driver's seat of your life today. Here's Steph.
Welcome back to another episode of Soul Driven with Steph. I cannot wait for our interview with our guest today. She is a new friend that I have recently connected with. Please welcome to the podcast, Cat Roten.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. I'm so excited for our conversation today.
Me too. So Kat and I connected in August at the Powerhouse Women event, and we've just had so many just similarities as we've followed each other online. And I'm super excited to get to know you more on the podcast today. So one of my favorite things to start off with is just your origin story. What got you into entrepreneurship and what you are currently doing now?
Yeah. So how far back do we want to go?
As far back as you feel we need.
I love it. I love it. So actually, I say I have about 10 years of experience in like hospitality, hotels, and events. I mean, that really is what I do now. But my mom reminded me just a few weeks ago that I've been doing this since I was 8. I was helping her put on 1,000 to 5,000 person events. And I was like, oh, it's born and bred in me, you know? So it really goes back to my 8-year-old self. But I went to school for hospitality. I went directly into management in hotels. And I bounced around to all areas and fell in love with the events side. And kind of that's where most of my experience in that decade really is where I fell in love and got my passion. But something started feeling off in about 2023. 2022, actually. It was October. And I started listening to podcasts. So I started listening to Lori Harder's When You're Happy, Lindsay Schwartz's Powerhouse Women. And I was like, this is like opening my eyes up to like possibilities. I went to Lindsay Schwartz's event in 2023, Powerhouse Women, where we met this year. And I was like, oh, there's possibilities. And I don't just have to do hotels. I don't have to be in corporate. I had just been listening to all the shoulds and the expectations because everyone just expected me to move up the corporate ladder and be a CEO or owning and running my own place one day. And I was like, I'm not excited anymore. And while I was there, I met an amazing woman who was like, you do events? I'm like, yeah, I do. And she's like, well, I've been having this idea, and this idea still has, just FYI, has not come to fruition. But a month later, her event manager in the company she was working for left. And she texted me 15 minutes after this person gave their notice and was like, are you interested? And I already was to that point of like something new, something different. It was still events. It was still corporations, but it actually was a completely different industry. So I was going from like hospitality hotels to promotional products, which any event is still hospitality, as you know, because you host so many events. But it's a little different because it was trade shows, expos, and people trying to sell products to you. And I got into the industry and I did not like it. People were just trying to sell to each other. There was no transformation, no like pouring into to try to help you learn and grow. It just was very, very masculine, to be completely honest. Like just very much like sell, do. There was really nothing else behind it. I started doing some inner work and when I transitioned to that new job as well. So starting to dive into breath work, started to dive into somatic movement. And as I got like closer to who I was and realizing what really excited me, I pulled the trigger and I went, I can't do this anymore. It's not lighting me up. I'm a generator. So it's like, I'm a hell yes, I'm a hell no. It has to light me up to be excited about it. And so I was like, this isn't right. And I took the risk. And I was the breadwinner in my relationship with my husband. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, I got you. Like, we'll figure it out. And so March 31st of this year, I left my corporate job and went full on into entrepreneurship. Like, we're doing this, we're doing the thing. So
Yes.
I had my company for a few months, but it was like, oh, it's just a fun thing on the side. And then it became real. And so I've been building it. And my business now, for everyone listening, is Impactful Event Co. So I do help women entrepreneurs put on their events, anything from helping support you with resources, DIY, all the way up to do it like I do it all for you services. So it's been a scary ride, yet also it's the happiest I've ever been as well.
Yes, I love that. Well, we have so many similarities as you were sharing that, like party planning since I was a child, love planning parties. Sounds like you had that with your mom. Yeah, we're both generators. I need to feel super passionate about what I'm doing, or I just do not show up as my best self. Like, it's just really hard for me to fake it. And
Yep.
I'm feeling like that is the same way for you. But sometimes I have to go through all these different experiences, trial and error, to figure out like what fits and what doesn't fit. And that whole path leads us to where we're supposed to be, which is sounds like you are exactly where you're supposed to be right now. And it doesn't mean that the path is easy to get there, but just being able to, like you said, tune back into yourself, know yourself really well, always helps. So I love this conversation around events and event planning because, yes, I love hosting and event coordinating myself. But how do you feel that experiencing events, even as an attendee, because you have just recently attended a lot of events too, how does that impact then what you do for your work and helping people create that experience for their own event?
Yeah. So I love this question because, one, not many people ask me this. I think they just see I go to events and they don't really know like what I'm doing there or like why. And ultimately, I do it to see different ways because everyone. So I'll preface this. When I work with somebody, I always say you have to know your core why, and you have to understand that you're not meant to copycat what everyone else is doing. You have clients, you have your community, you have those attendees. They're coming for you. Like, ultimately, it comes down to you, the speakers, all the stuff. So when you create that room and that experience in it, it should be unique. And so for me, when I step into rooms, that's what I'm looking for. I'm like, what is it that's unique in each one, that's individualized to that person? And what can I take away to learn maybe a better way of doing it, or an efficient way to do it, or another option to give my clients? Because there's so many ways to do it. There's not one size fits all. There's not 10 size fits all. There is hundreds and thousands of ways to do it. And I love getting that perspective because it just teaches me, okay, if a client is struggling to make a decision, I now have maybe 3 other ideas because I've seen it done another 3 ways I hadn't seen it before. So that's why I love getting in the room and doing that. I also love it for the connections. Like, you truly make deeper connections and when you're networking in person. Virtual is incredible. You meet so many more people that way. But when you're in the room, you go deeper and you get to know that person on a very different level. So for me, that's part of who I am, is I'd rather an in-person connection. And that's how we met, was at like 4 different events over the course of 2 days that we both were attending. But it's those connections when you keep seeing that person or you keep kind of interacting that you start to realize and build that relationship further. So those are kind of the 2 reasons I do that. And I become top of mind as well when that's the case. Because I'm putting myself in the room and people keep seeing me and they're like, I've had the question asked, do you live in Arizona? I'm like, no, I should, but I don't. I'm just here all the time.
Yes. Well, I think I love being able to, write off a conference as
Yes.
a business expense because that's exactly what it is. But it is just fun to go and attend as an observer to not only get ideas, like you said, but to make those connections. I mean, even for me going, like, I'm always looking for like speakers for my own event and, vendors and people that I can collaborate with. Maybe it's for this podcast or different things like that. So there is so much more that you can get out of an event than just the content.
Yes.
But you have to be super intentional about going in with that mindset that, I'm not here to just learn whatever from the speakers. I'm here to learn about the event, from the connections I've made, and just like really getting the most out of it. I feel like you have to have that mindset mentality.
Yeah. I actually want to touch on this because this has been an interesting experiment I've been doing in the last few weeks and events. And I think this is good for you listening as well. I was challenged by someone actually, because usually my intention going in is very much more specific, kind of what you were saying. It's, I'm here to learn and see what they're doing. I'm here to make the connections, like make so many I want to make, or the reason to get all, podcast guests, like you said, or clients. I actually went in about a week ago to an event and someone challenged me because I've been constantly going that I'm exhausted, to be completely honest.
You've
Like
been through a lot.
mentally, I've done a lot. And they were like, well, what if your intention for this next event is just to be present? You're not giving, you're not receiving. You're going to just let yourself be in flow and be present and see what happens. And when I tell you that changed my perspective, like, and how I showed up to the room, I felt like I actually showed up like not more confident, but just more comfortable, like in myself. Like, well, I'm just going to be here and see what happens. And whoever I connect with, there's a reason I was meant to connect with them. Whatever I heard from the speakers, I was meant to hear that and take that with me. And I left that event in a very different, I almost felt like I got my power back and understanding, like, I know who I am, like, and very just grounded in who I was. And I haven't felt that in a while because events can really just be like, you're all over the place. So you're just a little scattered brain. So I challenge you listening to really think about that sometimes. Like, how can you be present? What does that look like for you? Because we can get caught up in the conversations, but we can get caught up on our phone. There might be work that's left at home that you're needing to catch up with, clients that are calling. Like, how can you ensure that your space is very confined so it's just you and you can be truly present to soak in everything and everyone around you, whatever that might look like for you and what you need?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like even when I went to Arizona by myself, that was very much my experience because I wasn't there with anyone else and I didn't feel pressured to go do anything that I didn't want to do. And it was very much just like, here I am showing up as who I am. I didn't really know what to expect. So I think going in sometimes I still had intentions of what I wanted to get out of it, but not knowing what to expect too was really just more relaxing because you're not upholding these crazy high expectations either of what it should be. And I think even from the event host perspective, that is where I'm at, is that's why it's so important to pull people in to take over the pieces of the event that suck me into the details, because I just want to be in the here and now. I just want to be present with the attendees, having whatever conversations are supposed to happen, whatever I'm supposed to gain from the speakers, I gain. That's really my intention as the host now, but it's taken years to get to that point because when you first start, like, you are doing everything. So let's talk about that a little bit. For the entrepreneurs, the visionaries, the people that want to host their own event, it is overwhelming how many hats you will wear from marketing and promoting sides, ticket sales, to the actual setup, the takedown, the coordinating of the speakers, the vendors, the sponsors. The list just goes on and on and on and on, right? So how do you help them carry out an amazing event and ultimately make an event, profitable, scalable, and repeatable, so that there are systems that can be evolved and grown year after year, so that hopefully on year 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, they don't have to be doing every single piece of that event and they can just enjoy it more, which is the stage and where I'm at.
I love it. So there's a lot jam-packed into this. I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. And like, if anyone has any questions, like I'm on Instagram, you can DM me, you can ask. I love answering questions and supporting where I can. So to kind of go back to the very beginning, before you can really start putting in the systems, you can start really creating and becoming profitable, you have to know and answer like these 5 foundational questions. And these questions include along the lines of, what is your core why? So like, why are you hosting the event? Because every other decision you're going to make from starting the planning process to the end of the process needs to come back to why you're doing it. People like to deviate. They're like, oh, but I saw this and it looks so much fun and I want my attendees and myself to enjoy it. I'm like, great, but does that align with why you're doing the event? Again, caught up in copycatting. We don't want to do that. Who is your ideal attendee? Just like an ideal client, who is the person that you're wanting in that room? Do you want to be profitable or do you want to break even for the first event? It is possible, and I'll get to that in a second, to be profitable much more earlier on, but you have to be strategic. There's a little bit more work behind it, and you know this very well. And then the other 2 questions are, what size and type of event do you want? Because that, again, that's going to determine what size venue you have, the location of the venue, inside, outside, the setup, all the stuff. So you have to know that. And then your pricing. And that can be broken down. It can be simple. People, I think, overcomplicate it when it comes down to it. But it comes back again, you have to answer the other 4 questions before you can even determine your price point. Because you need to know how big of the event's going to be, what kind of space that you're going to need, who are the people in the room, what can they afford to pay. So how can you make sure that it's not going to be extremely out of their comfort zone, but you also don't want it to be under what the value is that you're providing in the room. So those are like the core questions I say people need to have before you can even start the planning process. Now, the planning process, I've created a few resources, and that's where I really, these initial, like the aspiring, the beginner event host can really lean into. It's the not so fun tracking your numbers, that you need to track your numbers. You need a budget and you need to track, because then you're going to know if you're profiting or you're losing money. And then the second piece are sponsorships. And I think that's really where, for scalability, for profiting, for just in general an event, if you can start off with this from the beginning and slowly build over time, it comes down to really helping support you and you feeling more confident showing up, being able to put those deposits down for all the different little details that you're having to do and bringing those people in. And I'll preface this, and I think this is a great point to make for people too. There are financial sponsorships, but there's also in kind. And I've had a few people recently ask me, because they're like, what do you mean by in-kind sponsorships? And if you don't host events yet, you may not know that in-kind basically is where someone's providing that service or providing that product for you in place of the financial piece. So sometimes you can approach a venue and say, hey, would you be willing to sponsor the venue space? So instead of you paying the $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 or whatever it is, they're going to gift that to you, sponsor it. And in turn, in exchange, you're still doing the promoting them in the marketing material, the branding, the logos, whatever that looks like for you. There's so many ways to do it. But I really tell people to start sponsorships, start utilizing those from the beginning. Because again, those can also start to scale. And then you can actually start to get sponsors that are not just for your events. They're sponsoring maybe your event, your big event, and then some smaller ones as well. Or they sponsor the big event and some other things that happen in your business. And there's just so much to build off of. So that's kind of what I would say if you're aspiring, answer those 5 core questions. And then I'm going to tell you, you have to track your numbers and start working on sponsorships. It's not the fun, it's not the exciting things, but if you have those 2 systems in place from the beginning, it's so much easier to scale and grow and build upon.
100%. And I will share just from my own experience, the first year that we did our Sister Circle Summit, we didn't have sponsors. We just put it on, right? And I think we probably broke even, if that, right? And then the second year was like, we need sponsors. So we brought on sponsors, and we've continued to grow those sponsorship like partnerships and relationships year after year. So every year when it comes around, they are just like, yeah, we want to sponsor. We sponsored last year. We want to sponsor this year. And you can start to build out like some higher level tiers of sponsorships But you really need to nail your marketing then with it. Like if you are saying that we are going to give you all this marketing to be a, gold level sponsor, whatever that looks like, then you have to really be pushing and marketing in the way that you promise those sponsors. Last year, we added vendor sponsors. So small businesses actually had tables, and we knew doing that, we want to make sure our attendees are going to these tables and talking to these people. So that is worth it for them. So we actually created a sponsor scavenger hunt where people would bop around to each table and then turn in their little scavenger hunt form. And we drew winners for prizes, and people loved it. So like if you're going to have sponsors, make sure you either build that into your marketing or you build it into the event experience to make sure that they are getting the most out of it, so that they want to continue to sponsor year after year. And then it just compounds. And then you have, so many sponsors every year. And that really is how you build not only an amazing event experience, I think, from those sponsorships and vendors, but it's also how you scale and grow in your profitability. To talk about your budget piece, I actually just did my budget for our Sister Circle Summit 2025. Woo! I know, it was the first time that I sat down and did it like initially from the beginning and not like halfway through, like, oh, where are we at? Right.
Yep.
And I feel really proud of that. And our budget is increased, which means, okay, what do our ticket sales need to be? That's going to determine our pricing, right? So you have to know the budget in order to know, well, one, how many sponsorships do you need? And what are you spending on different things? And also, what can I charge then? And how many attendees do we really need in order to, hit our revenue goal, whatever that is? So I 100% agree with every single piece of that you just shared. And if that's overwhelming, that like, I'm on year 5. So year 1, you're just, maybe you have one sponsor. You have a really small venue where, like you said, you're just trading, like just getting as creative as possible so that you can make some money off of the event, because trust me, that's a lot of work to not make any money. But you're also like, I think you have to kind of go into it with the mindset that this is something I want to do again in some way, shape, or form, so that I have a system that I can then repeat and continue to build off of that over time.
Yes. Well, and I want to hit on 2 things that kind of came up when you were talking. One, the sponsorship piece. I also like to remind people these sponsors are also part of your community. And kind of what you said, where they keep coming back, that's because you start to build this repertoire and they're part of the community and they want to be there because they feel a part of it. So when you are connecting with them, when you're finding them for the first time, just remember, how can you make that experience so special for them too, just like you would for your attendees? Because they will keep coming back as long as they feel how special and how important your message is and what you're doing, and seeing that impact that's kind of spreading throughout. The second piece I wanted to hit on a little bit, just briefly, because I realized I didn't kind of talk about this, with the systems and the numbers, of course, are like the core things. When you're recreating, the biggest thing I will tell you is going into it, have everything in one place. So like I have my own document. It's like an Excel thing. That's a lie. That's what I was doing. I use Asana now, and that is like my saving grace. If you have like an actual project management system, that's an even better way to track everything. But have a place where you're tracking each step you're taking, because then next year, and even the things that you remember last minute, or like you forgot and you're like, oh, I got to do this real quick. Add that in there somewhere, whether it's a project management system or like you're tracking the task you're doing. Because when you go to host the event the next year, you already have the list of tasks. They might not be perfectly organized, but that's something you can do after the event when it's already happened, is reorganize the steps and maybe create a better process for you. But if you can't bring a planner in or an event strategist person in, just write down everything you're having to do throughout the process, because it will make the next time, just like tracking your numbers, track the vendors, track the sponsors. It makes it so much easier when you have it tracked to recreate.
1000%. Yes. And that's where I'm at now, because last year we used Asana to track the whole process. And so this year, I'm going into maternity leave, and we already have a system in place so that things can start to move forward on the event while I am at home with a newborn baby. So that was very relieving and exciting. So I absolutely agree. And I was going to say too, off of that, pulling the vendors in, they become part of your community. Also asking your people to be vendors, right? We always give our community of members like first dibs, and the people that have already sponsored, like, hey, do you want to be part of this? This year, I'm really excited for our summit. We're actually creating something new that is going to give even more of our small business members an opportunity to showcase their business at it. So just like thinking of the event in a way that, like, how can I really utilize this event, not only to create transformation for the attendees, but to give my small business community like a really awesome opportunity to highlight what they do and what they're passionate about.
I'm so excited to hear about this experience. I want to know what you're doing.
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, so what tips would you give to, you kind of gave some already, but to someone that is literally in the idea stages of their event? And there's so many different ways that they could take it, right? They could go big, they could do a small, intimate setting. Like, how do you really decide what is the right maybe size of an event for the experience and the transformation that you want people to have?
So there's two kind of steps I will tell you to do with this. The first one is kind of going back to that core why. I challenge you to sit and like meditate and really visualize what the event looks like. What is it that you picture? What is it that you see happening? What does the room look like? What does it feel like? Because I think when you can feel that and see that, it kind of helps you start to realize, okay, this is what I want to bring to fruition. The second thing I'll say with that, don't go huge the first time. You're
Yes.
not going to host a 500, 1,000 person event from the beginning unless you have a community around you that is like massive, that they're already attending events like you're going to, and this is just another thing to build off of. Most of the time, though, I would keep it smaller. Especially for your first one when you're doing it by yourself and you don't have a planner. When you start to hit that like 7,500 person event size, you really need to start looking at getting some help, whether that's a virtual assistant, whether that, you know what I mean? It's just somebody to support you. You need a support system, a team that's going to help you along the way. Because you don't want to go into this event thinking you can do it all yourself, and then you get burned out, and then you have PTSD and you never want to host another event.
Yes.
I've heard that too many times too. It doesn't have to be that complicated. Keep it simple. Someone literally told me yesterday, they're like, yeah, I just keep it stupid simple. I'm like, that's perfect. Keep it stupid simple the first time around, especially because the idea is they're coming again to the room for you. They want to interact with you. They want to hear from you. Yes, they want to hear the speakers coming in. Yeah, they want to interact with everybody else. But ultimately, the initial reason they're getting in that room is for you. Or if it's a community you have, such as you, Stephanie, they're getting in there because they know the people like maybe that they've kind of been interacting with virtually. And they're like, okay, I'm getting in the room to be with her and those other women. I just preface that because I think we like to overcomplicate things, just like we like to overcomplicate business and life. And we don't even need to overcomplicate events. Keep it simple. Allow the space for people to interact with one another. Allow the space for you to pour into them. Allow the space for you to take care of yourself amongst it too, so you can show up the way that you want to and you need to. I think that's going to be like my number one thing I preface is just keep it simple at the beginning. Smaller size, not all the hoorah and everything. Keep it simple. And how can you pour yourself? What is your message that you're trying to pour, and how can you pour that into them and make sure that they understand and connect with one another?
Yeah, I agree, because you could have the most beautiful stage setup, decor, all the freebies, the swag, everything. But if the content and the core message and the experience itself is not landing with the people that are there, the rest doesn't matter, right? Like, I didn't have all the fancy stuff the first couple years, and it was really focused on the content and the messaging and the people and getting them in the room. And now we get to be like, ooh, what's the theme? And like, how are we going to, make this super beautiful and have a videographer and photographer and all those things. But from the beginning, it has been about the experience and the people there in the room, and not just like the fancy things. So, and it's like the same advice I'd give a brand new business owner. It's like, forget all the shiny stuff when you're just starting. Focus on creating connections, relationships, and like genuine, authentic pouring into the people that are there showing up, because that will multiply, year after year tenfold. And then you get to focus on all the shiny party planning things when you have kind of reached that point.
Exactly. It's just, again, like everything we do in business and life, we like to overcomplicate, and we really don't need to. We really don't need to the first few times. Just come back again, visualize, and really, what is that you're picturing? What is it that you're imagining? And it also might be you're visualizing something really big, and that's amazing. But also, when you're visualizing, what does that look like on a little bit smaller level too? And how can you start to create that? And then that's where we get into exactly what we were talking about, the scalability and growing it and all the other things that come behind it down the road. But for that first initial event, just keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate.
Yeah. And it's just like, again, starting a business, like, we want hundreds of clients. And I'm always like, well, could you handle that right now? No. You have no staff and no systems. You're just starting. So let's focus on the 5 or 10 people that you are working with and making that experience really amazing. And I think you can take that advice into an event. Can you imagine if your first event blew up to 500 people? You don't even know how to handle that. You wouldn't be able to do it yourself. You'd have to hire. It would be overwhelming. You'd be so stressed out. Like, start small, build it off of that, build your confidence like as you grow the event, just like you build your confidence as you grow your business.
Exactly. Put that ego aside and show up as you.
Yes, totally. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about you more personally, because I want to get to know you more. I know you're always learning and growing. I'm sure events is a piece of that, but how do you fit personal and professional development into your day-to-day life?
It's a great question. Probably a little too much at times, if you ask my husband, to be completely honest. But no, on a daily basis, there's a few different things I do, and I kind of do this as a menu. I don't say like I need to do this every day. It's kind of like, here are my like options, and however I'm feeling that day is where I lean into. One, there's so many masterclasses, webinars, networking opportunities that are out there. I'll find a couple that call me each month that kind of I'm able to plug into my schedule and learn from people on a virtual side. So still kind of event basis, but they're more trainings, webinars, and learn from them. Podcast. I'm an avid podcaster. I have my own. I get on podcasts. I also listen to them. I still listen to Earn Your Happy, Powerhouse Women, but I've met some incredible women along the way, such as yourself, Stephanie, and then it's just kind of added to my library. And it was interesting when I first started listening to podcasts, and if you're listening to this, you may be in this or understand and have done this before too. I always felt like I had to keep up with everything. And when I started to get behind listening to episodes of certain ones, I would like scramble, I think, to like catch up. And then I realized it doesn't matter. I can listen to them whenever I want to or need to. And there's seasons where I can listen to it more and seasons I can't. And right now, we moved back to North Carolina, close to my hometown in April. I don't have a commute anymore. I was driving about 30 minutes one way each day. So I was able to listen to more podcasts. I don't drive anymore. I sit in my house, and that's where I work from. So it's a little different incorporating podcasts in. So then I go for walks. I try to do that. But I've also learned not to do too much, because when I'm receiving and listening so much, I start to like think through my business more. And sometimes I just need to be and not be taking in all the information. But podcasting and then reading. I have a laundry list of books that I want to read that are all like the personal professional development. And you think from like a business book, it's like the 6-step process all the way to like higher self habits and like helping me with like my personal development. So there's just so many different things that you can do. And that's just what I do personally. There's so many other ways as well. But I also have realized I don't have to do it every day. And I think that's been a big aspect for me, who's a doer, who's a generator, who's an Enneagram 3. I literally just want to be go, go, go. And we can't. We are not made to constantly be taking in the information, doing the things, all of that. So don't get mad at yourself if you go a day without some type of development too.
Yes,
Okay.
totally. And yeah, I agree. Like I used to be like that too, where it's like, oh, I missed this episode and this episode, but not every episode is for you either. So just like this podcast, if you're listening to this and you're like, I'm never going to plan an event, you might skip this episode, and that's fine. You shouldn't, because we're talking about even more awesome things than that. But like there's just certain things that and maybe it's just the seasonality of your life too. Where it's like, oh, I'm actually trying to like slow down, like you said, or just like not overthink everything in my business. So actually listening to this is not helpful right now. So I think just knowing yourself and knowing what you need. I love going through seasons of like reading books on specific topics that I'm either going to teach on or I'm super interested in. And just kind of like, it's like self-learning, like figuring out what do I need right now in this season and what pieces of that can I get from a course or a podcast or a book or something like that. So,
well, and
I
I'll be
love it.
completely honest. I'm assuming most of the people listening are probably women entrepreneurs for this podcast. But if there's someone who's still corporate or who does still work full time while you're running your side business too, I didn't start doing a lot of these things till about a year, 2 years ago. When I was in the corporate space, all of my personal development, professional development was tied to my job. They paid for me to go to conferences. They were the ones teaching me, training me. It looks different depending on what you're doing and exactly what you said. And you may not realize the other options out there either. So be open to learning about the other ways, because that's also how I went from working in corporate to where I am now, was because I opened my eyes up to what other ways are there of personal and professional development, not just the ways I've always been doing.
Yes, I think that's such a strong point. And there are, I would say, a mix of people listening to this, small business or still working in corporate. And so, I mean, I think that you can absolutely figure out different ways to learn, whether you're in an environment where it's like self-created or you are working somewhere else. You can always incorporate these elements on your own, which is what I love about podcasts and books and all of those things. So I'm curious, what has been one of the biggest challenges you've faced and what did you learn from it?
So I'm going to go with a recent experience. This is a good question. I've experienced some very hard times recently. I lost my grandfather about 4 weeks ago, and I also have been losing friendships, like relationships that I never imagined. And it all happened around the same time. But I think there was a reason. There was a lesson I had to learn, and it was a challenge because the relationships I was losing were maybe not long-term ones. It's individuals I've met over the past few years as I've stepped into this world of personal professional development. And we've locked arms, and they've been kind of my support system of like, you can do this, like take the next step. And I've gotten to a point where it's not quite the same support anymore. They're holding me back. And I've struggled because the people pleaser in me, who has always want everyone to be happy and to feel like they're taken care of and that they're being heard and they're being seen, struggles to like take my step back and like see and be like, is this serving me right now? Like, is this giving me energy, or is it draining my energy in the moment? Because one thing I'm learning to prioritize is myself. And it's so hard to put myself first because I haven't for a very long time. And now I'm learning those ways too. And that means saying no more often. And that also means having to let some relationships go off to the wayside, and hopefully they'll come back later on in the future and it will look different probably. So they don't have to go completely away. But it's so hard for me to kind of set that boundary and be like, I can't right now. I can't just jump on the phone with you in this moment. I'm having to take care of myself, take care of my family. I'm trying to grow a business. Or even I just can't talk to you after some things have happened. Something was just said to me especially. And I didn't realize this, and you may know this, and you listening may or may not know this, but no matter what it is, whether it's the loss of a loved one or it's the loss of a relationship, it's the loss of an identity and who we're going through, we grieve that. and we grieve it in our own ways, and we have to let ourselves grieve.
Yep.
And I've put that off and pushed that off for so long for a lot of stuff that all of this has been bubbling up just because of me having to grieve my grandfather. I think
Yeah,
these other griefs started to surface that I didn't realize had been sitting there.
totally.
And people have been asking, they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, but like, you're still showing up and you're still doing these things. There's this idea that we can have mixed emotions. I think for so long it's a negative thing. People are like, no. You're either sad or you're happy, or like you have to feel a certain way. You don't. You can feel
Mhm.
mixed emotions. One's can be stronger than the other in the moment, but you can still be sad because you're grieving over the loss of something. But you also can be excited for your business, or excited for your job, or excited for something that's happening in your life. And it's okay. We don't need to be like, I feel like we get hard on ourselves. It's like, I can't be excited about that because I should be grieving this over here, or upset. And it's like, no, you can be both.
Yeah.
Because when we're grieving, we're actually growing, is what
Yep.
I've learned,
Totally.
no matter what that looks like. And we're taking lessons and learning things. And I just love it because my grandfather was such a sweet, sweet man. And it was so hard losing him. But at the same time, I've learned so much from him. And I've gotten to reflect back on some of those things that I forgot about,
Yeah.
and now get to carry forwards with me. And just like with relationships, there was stuff I learned from those relationships and those people who were so special in my life. Like, there's never a regret. There's never anything. It's so hard to leave them behind. But I also know that they were there for me when I needed it. And now I get to hopefully be that person for someone else too. So I think I got really serious there, and I am so sorry for that. But that's been
No.
a huge challenge and something I've really been going through. And it's been the past 4, 6, 8 weeks that it really has hit hard for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable enough to share that. And I just know what that feels like to have that sort of grief. I think we all do on some level, whether it's like an actual person passing or, like you said, loss of an identity. For me, last year, I felt like I was grieving all year, but I was also having the most amazing year of my life. And two things can happen at the same time. It's not one or the other. Even this year, like, I'm so excited to meet my baby, but I'm also probably grieving the fact that, like, my body is not the same and I'm kind of missing my old body at this point, and my life is never going to be the same. Like,
Yep.
it's just like this weird bittersweetness, I think. But like you said, that's growth and that's evolution and that's change. And I think we're all going through our own sort of grieving in the past couple of years. Like, everyone collectively has grieved something, I think. So you're absolutely not alone. And that is what this podcast is for, is these like soul driven conversations deeper than just the surface level topic, because we can all relate on that level of grief and change and identity and all of those things. So, I mean, I have definitely been there, and it was hard to like show up, and I still was showing up, and on the outside it probably didn't look like I was grieving because I was happy.
Mhm.
But there were still pieces of me that, it's like something reminds you of, oh yeah, I used to do this, this, and this, and now I don't do that anymore. And you just have these moments where you're taken back in time, and it's bittersweet, but yet you're really grateful for the path that you're on too, and there are no regrets as well. So I can really relate to that.
Yeah. It's when it's like, as soon as you get that awareness of it, just like with
Mm-hmm.
anything, when you become aware, it gets a little easier. Yeah. And then it
Yep.
also just makes it seem more, I don't know, understandable, and you can
Yeah.
relate to others, and like others don't feel alone either. And that's where I come in. I mean, it's very much, I mean, you have your podcast, I have mine. I say like I share very vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
golly, I can't say the word vulnerably on there. And it's because I don't want people to feel alone. And what I go through is not the same thing you go through as someone else goes through, but we relate on some type of level. But there's also never regrets. And I love you said that, because everything I've talked about that was a negative experience for me, whether it's in my jobs and the hardships from this past few months of leaving, the stability and all the stuff, I don't regret any of it. And I don't regret putting myself in those things because there's a reason on like a soul level that we needed to go through that and experience that and learn from it. And that's what's gotten us to where we are now. And we're going to keep going through some of those things. But on a soul level, we have to experience it to learn that lesson, to get over that challenge, to be confronted with maybe our own fears and stuff. And it's a challenge that we have to get through to keep growing, to keep moving, and to actually get those things in life that we want or don't even know about that we want yet.
Yeah, I firmly believe that we all are sent here with these like soul lessons that we have to learn. And oftentimes they are through the most challenging experiences that we would never wish upon ourselves, but we have to go through them to get that soul growth to then continue to evolve and become that higher self that we're meant to be. So I think you agree.
Yes. Agree with all of it.
I love it. Okay. Well, I'm curious, what is exciting you about the future? Like, what is next for you, whether it's business or personal?
So I haven't fully announced this yet, but I'll announce it on here because it's just who I am when I get excited about it. I've been pondering an idea since May. So if you're listening to this live, the recording, it's like 4 months, 5 months I've been sitting on it, which for me is a very long time. And that means like it truly is on my heart. I have been wanting to start an event host community. So a place that anyone who hosts an event feels supported. It would have resources. We'd have live calls and Q&As and the things so that people just finally host the event and keep doing it and know that they're supported through the initial and the growth and the scaling and all the stuff that's scary. Just like in business, there's nothing like this for event hosts specifically. So I am taking the Q4, building out a roadmap, building out some digital resources and all the things, and going to be launching that beginning of next year. So I'm like, we're doing it. We're doing it.
And our community is the first to know. And I'm so excited because we were just talking about this on our call earlier this week. And I just know there's so many people, small business owners, especially within Sister Circle, that want to host events. And I just think this is an amazing opportunity to fill a gap and a void in this sort of self-created industry in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. Yeah. It's just cool to see like what has come out of even just like COVID. You know, I think events have just expanded. I know that was the intention why we started ours, because everything had gone away, in-person events, and we wanted to bring people back together in person. So it's really cool to see how many events have come out of that period of not connecting in person, because we know the value of it now and it's so important. So knowing that there will be a opportunity to join a community of other people hosting events and to learn from you and each other and the other speakers, I think will be such a cool opportunity. I'm so excited for you.
I'm so excited. And I want to say this as well on here, because I feel like there might be someone who needs to hear this too. I sat on this for a long time because people kept telling me to go for that high ticket, go for the big events, go help and support all these other people. But it's been on my heart, and I've been called, I know, to do this first before I can even build and scale that other aspect of my business. I still offer the one-on-one support. I still do the coordinating. I still do the planning. But something about this community and really supporting these entrepreneurs who want to do it but just don't have the time or don't have the capacity, or they say they do, but then they're being pulled from their family and their business and sales and all the things. I was like, I have to come back to this, and I can't even grow my business in other ways until this baby's been born and this little community is there and can start growing. So if there's something on your heart and other people are coming in your ear and telling you, oh, no, you need to go for the money, you got to go for the higher ticket, you got to go to things, do what's on your heart. Because there's a reason it's there. And to be honest, the other part won't grow, and you can do that, but you don't have to do it now. And that's been the hardest battle for me, hearing everybody tell me these things and then realizing, I want to do that, but not right now. That there's something else here.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And just knowing this is where like knowing yourself comes into play. Like knowing yourself, you're listening to your gut, listening to your intuition over other people's voices. When I was launching the Sister Circle membership in December of 2022 to start in 2023, I was literally closing down a business that I had for 10 years. That was a fitness and yoga studio. So another membership, I was downscaling, and I had just gotten into real estate. So add another business there. And so it literally made 0 cents for me to launch another membership for small business owners. And even when I launched it, I had one person sign up initially. So, I mean, there were so many reasons for me to just be like, okay, this is not the right time. No one wants this. Why am I doing this? I already have 2 other businesses. One I'm scaling back, the other one I'm trying to grow. And now I want to launch this thing. And it was just this gut intuition, God calling, whatever you want to call it, that was like, no, you need to do this. Like, this is what you are called to do. This is what you are meant to do. And I pushed forward with the idea. I kind of re-envisioned it into that 3-month commitment I was telling you about. And we launched the beginning of 2023 with 18 members then. And we've continued to grow it now to a little over 50 in a year and a half year and a half. But I just knew that it was meant to be. And I could have went and I could have just focused on real estate and, go for those top dollar clients. And like you're saying, and I just knew that, no, actually I'm meant to serve the people around me in a much more meaningful, deeper way than just going for the dollar signs. And I think that's the generator in us.
Yeah.
Like the work we do needs to be passionate. I need to do work that I am passionate about. And there are times where, you find ways to make things fun that maybe aren't all the time. But I 100% agree with that advice for anyone who has a calling on their heart to go do something. And especially when it comes to building a community, it's often because we look around and we don't see the community of the void that we're trying to fill. And I didn't see that in my local area. I mean, it is all over the country. There are other communities, but there was nothing local. And I know that you're in the same place where you're like, I don't see this community for event builders, planners, people that want to host. So who better to create it than you?
Yeah. I'm so excited. I'm so excited
for you. So my favorite question to ask is, what are you most proud of about yourself?
Listening to my gut recently. I feel like I've had to turn inwards a lot, and make some hard decisions. Like I said, put myself first, basically, is what I've had to do. And it's the hardest thing, but it's also probably the thing I'm most proud of, is that I've chosen myself first.
Yes. Well, I'm very proud of you for that too, because it is not easy to do. No, and former people pleaser myself, really hard to make hard decisions that are going to disappoint or upset other people. Exactly. Yeah. Well, my final question is, what drives your soul today, Kat? What do you get up for each day?
It's the people around me. It's knowing the impact, and that there's so many people out there that have a message that's on their heart, and more people need to hear it. And whatever that looks like for me that day, whether it's, getting on a call and helping someone create their event, or just showing up and sharing my story and inspiring them to take the action they need to take, even if it's not an event. That's what gets me up, is I know there's more people out there with stories and messages that just need to get to more ears. And so I have to keep showing up, and I have to keep waking up every morning to be able to help those get their messages out there.
I love it. Well, thank you for sharing your story and your message with us today. Tell our listeners where to find you, and also about your podcast as well.
Yes. So my podcast is Imperfectly Impactful. So I really do focus on telling the story, my entrepreneurship story, or those of my guests who are coming on, which Stephanie will be on there soon. But it really is just that you do not have to be perfect to make an impact on yourself for other people. So that Instagram page is at imperfectly.impactful. And then best way to connect with me is also on Instagram. It's at cat.roten, and that's Roten. And cat, yes, like the animal, is what it is. But I live on there most of my time, setting some boundaries, I will say, for myself. So not sitting on there all the time or too late into the night and scrolling. But that's where I usually hang out. Like I said, if you have any questions from anything I talked about, want to dive deeper, it's on the podcast potentially. I have an event series that I already have on there, but also just shoot me a DM and I'm happy to answer questions. And support you however you need.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, Kat. And thank you for listening to another episode. Until next time, keep following what drives your soul. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Soul Driven with Steph. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it out with someone else who needs to hear this message. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that you know when new episodes drop. And until next time, be sure to take care of your mind, your body, and your soul.